Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here, and welcome to today's recap of the Todd, Monken, and Dell McGee press conferences Thursday here on the campus at UGA. And of course, the Bulldogs 1 week now into the fall camp, and we've had a few opportunities to see the team in practice, kind of getting a feel for all this talent that Kirby Smart's brought in and how well groomed the offense looks with Stetson Bennett back at quarterback and a lot of really talented guys on that offensive line, a lot of familiar names. Tate Ratledge back in the mix. Of course, a lot of talk about the tight ends room. I don't think there's ever been a tight ends room like this. I know there's been other programs with great tight end lineage, but in terms of a program that had 4, 5, 6 guys in at one time, we know them on a first name basis. Brock, Eric, Darnell, Oscar. You just typically the tight end position is not the sexiest spot. But here it is at Georgia. And with what Brock Bowers did last year as a freshman of the year, you don't think about player of the year in college football being a tight end, right? I think the most valuable offensive player, certainly the most indispensable guy in last year's offense, was Brock Bowers. And so when Todd Monken spoke today, and Kirby does allow his coordinators to speak at the beginning of the year, typically during the bowl season is when you get them again. It'd be great if we could get these coordinators and position coaches every week, but and we'll see how that works out, as these guys are very good and detailed talking about their position groups. And so I asked Todd Monken today, the first question, have you run an offense where you've put 4 tight ends on the field at one time? That's not something that's that crazy. 14 personnel or 13 if it's 3 tight ends. That could absolutely happen. Now, when you think about tight ends, they're attached typically to the line of scrimmage, lined up next to offensive tackles. But when you have the sort of talents and players that George does, you can split them out almost as if they're slot receivers. And Monken talked about that today. So I asked him about it. Have you ever run it? And he said, well, he joked, half jokingly, well, if you run it too much, you'll have every wide receiver in the portal. And there's truth to that. I mean, Jermaine Burton's not here, folks. He's at Alabama now. And the fact of the matter is he'll get more volume there than he would have gotten at Georgia. But the point is, Monken's getting paid to win games and utilize the talent that he has. Georgia has talented receivers. We know about A.D. Mitchell. We know about Ladd McConkey. We know about Dominic Blaylock. Arian Smith and all the speed he brings. So there are options on the perimeter. But the tight ends here are truly elite. They're on another level. There's not another tight end room. So I kind of asked about, how are you going to use these guys? And, Monken said, look, we're here to use everybody to the best of their skill set. And he talked about how the defensive coaches tell him, hey, boy, when you use that formation, it sure does give us problems. Well, Monken has to be sure that when Georgia uses that 3 or 4 tight end formation, that they're not having problems. In other words, things have to go smoothly. The whole key to Todd Monken offense is the efficiency and just how detailed it is. Dell McGee talked about that. Todd Monken has everything drilled in tightly, the spacing right down to the inch. Stetson Bennett talked about that at SEC Media Days when he said he used the word anal to describe Todd Monken, and I'm sure it's true. I mean, great coaches are very detail-oriented and hold people accountable, and Todd Monken is no different. So I thought that was very interesting. Monken said he was asked about Stetson Bennett, said he's doing a better job between reps of communicating the plan. It's not necessarily what Stetson wants, it's what Monken wants, it's what the team wants, and Stetson is doing a better job of communicating game plan and the ideals of some of the concept that Monken wants. That's important when your quarterback has that level of communication, certainly as well as the timing that he has just from being the number one, but being able to communicate effectively to the other position groups, because Stetson Bennett has to be that point guard, right? Now, we know he can make plays with his feet on occasion, but more importantly, it's going to be the decision-making and his ability to distribute the ball effectively when he goes to the line of scrimmage, get Georgia in the right play, and then execute it. Make good decisions. Do not turn the ball over. Monken was asked about, the offense scoring more points? Does it need to carry? He kind of shrugged it off, said, too much is made of that. It's really just about winning, right? It's not about how many points do you average. It's doing what you have to do to win games. And once the game is in hand, there's no reason to take unnecessary risks just for the sake of statistics, right? You want the clock to run, you want to minimize the opportunities for injury, and you don't want to show any more of your offense than you have to. So it's not really all about going all out full blast trying to score as many points in every game as you can. It's going all out trying to win every game that you can and scoring as many points as you need, right? And taking as few chances as possible. So he was asked about not having a 1,000-yard receiver. A lot of other schools use that against Georgia, but the reality of it is, and Monken said it, if George Pickens is healthy, he's a 1,000-yard receiver. We heard JT Daniels predict that was going to happen before George got hurt, before JT got hurt, and I think it absolutely would have happened. I think if George and JT, if they both stay healthy, you're probably looking at a 1,200 or 1,300-yard receivers. So it is kind of interesting, though, to hear Monken say the same thing. And, as he said again, he's just such a get-it-done guy. He said, look, at the end of the day, it's about putting the puzzle together, and no one really cares who you have at the end of the day. It's not about being married to playing a certain formation or being married to generating certain stats. It's about being paid to win games. Now, he was asked about Arian Smith. You heard me mention him a little bit ago. Arian, of course, I think 3 of his 5 career receptions are for touchdowns. He's the guy with the Olympic track speed, ran track a little bit here at Georgia. He's been often injured. You may have read a recent report, my stock report. I mentioned Arian Smith lined up wrong. Look, you're going into your 3rd year, man. You can't be lining up wrong. Monken's not going for that, and Monken did get on him. And he said, he didn't directly tie it to one play we saw in one open practice, but because of the injuries, Arian has not been on the field to get the kind of reps that he needs to become that well-oiled part for that machine, right? He's more of a specialty or a situational player. So, what Monken wants is he wants the guy to stay healthy where he can get on the field, get enough reps so he can be a down-in and down-out player instead of just a guy you put in there in situational situations, right? You want Arian to grow into a guy that can be out there every down. He'll be that much more dangerous as an every down player. Right now he comes in and everybody goes, oh, hey, look, there's number 11. That's the fast guy. We better keep an eye on him. Have him out there all the time. That will be key, and you'll see him grow and get even better. So I thought that was interesting. I said you want to be able to trust those guys in those situations. Talked about losing James Cook. Obviously James Cook was a very versatile guy. Monken points out, he was able to track the ball downfield, catching the ball on the flats and on the short. That's one thing. But how many receivers can catch the ball, the wheel route, 20, 30, 40 yards downfield? Well, James Cook's one of those guys. Kenny McIntosh is the other. And he said, you went into games last year with a plan for James, knowing that Kenny could do it too. We saw that in the Cincinnati game. At the end of the 2020 season, right down the field, with Kenny McIntosh making those catches from JT Daniels in that bowl win over Cincinnati. Who's going to be that guy behind Kenny now? And Dejon Edwards has improved, and Dell McGee said everyone has improved pass catching skills, but Monken didn't have that same level of confidence in a number 2 behind Kenny in that perimeter downfield game with the running back. Going to be interesting to see if one of the running backs can emerge, can improve, can evolve, because you got to think when you do this game planning, you want to make sure you got guys that are capable of carrying out the game plans. Dell McGee said, hey, look, Kenny McIntosh, sky's the limit. Feels very confident with Kenny. He's been patient. He's waited his turn behind Zamir. James Cook feels like he can do it all. Run between the tackles, run outside the tackles. We talked about catching the ball downfield. Thought that was pretty interesting. Monken said, look, I do want to throw the ball. Just to be clear, it's not that Todd Monken wants to run this balanced, run-pass ratio. He's not into those numbers. A lot of this has to do with what your personnel does best. And Monken pointed out that last year they felt they could win with Stetson or JT, but they liked the mobility that Stetson brings. So if you have a mobile quarterback, then yes, you're going to roll him out more. You're going to run more RPOs, and you're going to run more of a play-action game. He wasn't the pocket guy JT was. So you build the offense around Stetson's abilities and the mobility, and they really liked that. And it was very efficient, as you saw. Georgia had one of the most efficient offenses in the nation. And I think that from what I've seen from Stetson, I think the velocity on the passes is improved. I saw that at practice the other day. I thought he checked down much quicker, much smoother than we saw a year ago. I think he's convinced now, look, you don't have to force the ball downfield. Stetson talked about needing better decisions. I think you're going to see that. I think this offensive line is elite. I think it's dominant. Monken talked about that. He said, man, I can't go into all the players, but there's a lot of great players, a lot of confidence with the offensive line. So you put it all together, and the offense has the potential to be dynamic. Last year it was efficient, and it was effective, and it was good enough. Now, we don't know what type of pressure the opponent's offense is going to put on Georgia's offense, right? We saw in the SEC championship game that didn't work out too well. Georgia wasn't able to get into that drop back game against Bama. And Monken knows that you've got to strengthen the things that you're not good at, because if you're having a day where you can't throw it, you better run it well. If you're having a day where you're struggling to run, you better throw it well. And so that's been a point of emphasis. I mean, Georgia knows where their strengths and weaknesses lie. This is a team that I think can run the ball very effectively. I think the play action game is solid, and I think they're going to try to add some different dimensions. I think they're going to work a little bit more with Stead in the pocket, a little bit more of the drop back game, so Georgia can be a better third down team. Regardless of how many points, you just never know what you're going to need on a given Saturday. Last year, Georgia played a lot of first-year quarterbacks. A lot of green quarterbacks were going up against a legendary defense. This year, a younger Georgia defense. Now, they look every bit as talented, folks. I got to tell you, go out there and watch practice, and the number of great players and athletes that Kirby Smart has stacked up, it's mind-blowing. It really is. But there's not as much experience, so you wonder, how do they communicate on the back end, right? How does that front seven do without a N'Kobe Dean, without a Jordan Davis? Talented guys, but not as experienced. So going to be very interesting to see how it all fits together. What does the Georgia offense need to do? Will they be pressed and pushed to do more, to open up more? Does it make sense to open up more? Will defenses force them to open up more? You open with Dan Lanning, a guy that knows your offense very well, that knows your players' strengths and weaknesses. Dan Lanning and the Ducks will take away plan A and plan B for Georgia, and they're going to make Georgia play left-handed, so to speak. And Todd Monken knows this. There's a great offensive staff. Monken talked about having Mike Bobo here as a sounding board, how valuable that is to him. Obviously, Buster Faulkner is a former offensive coordinator. You look in that offensive meeting room, and there's a lot of veteran coaches, certainly on defense, and we talked about it earlier this week, Will Muschamp and Glenn Schumann. But you look on offense and listening to Todd Monken talk, you're talking to a guy who's been a head coach, who's been an NFL offensive coordinator. I mean, Todd Monken, folks, I really believe he's as good as it gets. I feel like he is a real key. It was good to see Georgia lock him up with that $2 million contract, and you can just hear the command in his voice, and the self-awareness is so important. Monken is a guy who's done a self-scout. He knows what Georgia is. He knows what they're all about. He knows the challenges. He's had to answer the questions about the offense on the road. So very interesting to hear his presentation. He was asked about Don Blaylock. Said he's really more of a crafty receiver than he is, necessarily a runner or size or dynamics like that. And just the mental toughness for Blaylock to get back from an ACL. And Monken's example was, hey, you sprain your ankle playing basketball probably about a month before you even jump again. Well, imagine tearing your ACL twice. Blaylock does it once, he comes all the way back, he does it again. Mentally, Don Blaylock has had to overcome a lot, and I think we saw towards the end of last year he was overcoming that. And what a bonus that would be if you get Blaylock back where he was coming in. Just a guy who manages to get open, a guy who makes key plays, one more weapon in that offense for Todd Monken to use. So pretty interesting. Monken did say on Brock Bowers when I was asking him about, now you've got Eric Gilbert, right? So we say that Bowers and Gilbert and Washington, we say tight end. But when we look at these guys, they do so many different things. There's so much versatility. It's almost like multiple positions within the positions. And Monken kind of agreed with that when he said, you look at Brock and he's really more of a guy, you get the ball in his hands and then he runs after the catch, more like an H-back, like a fullback, like a running back, right? And so, and we saw that a lot. And his catch radius was much better than anybody had anticipated. A lot of those throws that Brock Bowers had weren't great throws. He would make great agile catches, and then runs after the catch really padded a lot of the passing numbers last year, came on his shoulders. And you get the feeling that Monken's not done with him yet. You get the feeling that, Brock Bowers is still going to be moved around, used a lot of different ways. And now you've got Eric Gilbert. And Monken said, hey, this is a guy who, like Brock, has a very unique skill set, and that he's got some receiver background. And so it's going to be real interesting to see how they deploy Eric Gilbert. You've heard Kirby on him in practice. Dog Nation's reported that. Not a bunch of haters. We're letting you know what the head coach is working on. If Kirby didn't care, he wouldn't yell at the kid. He goes after coaches and people that played the sports and understand this. The best players get coached the hardest, right? And Gilbert is a guy who's that close to greatness. He really is fantastic. Wait and see. I know there was a lot of hype coming in, and then there was disappointment when he had to take off last year for personal issues. Then we saw some good news spring. He was targeted in the red zone. But beyond red zone throws, this is a guy that can strike from all over the field, and it's really exciting to watch him. And to hear Monken talk about his receiver background, his ability to run routes. Obviously, he's got great hands. It's just going to be really, really interesting to watch the tight end room. One more note on Brock Bowers is Monken said, the GPS numbers say one thing, but watching him on the field, he said, watching him against UAB, it's like, that guy's pretty good. And it's just fun. Monken with just a real fun opportunity today to talk with the folks. Dell McGee, I thought really nice presentation. Last year, he got asked about being a head coach and got sidetracked a little bit. This year, he's like, look, I'm the head coach of the running backs. His career aspirations, right? It'll come to you. What did Kirby Smart, say that success comes to those who aren't looking for it. You just get the feeling that Dell is dialed in on this running backs room. He's got a big reload. Obviously, Zamir and Cook carried the load. This year it's going to start with Kenny McIntosh. He said had a great spring, likes the leadership that Kenny's presented, did good. Kendall Milton is a guy, obviously. Kendall's had some injuries the first 2 years here on campus. That's kept him off the field. So he hasn't gotten the maximum number of reps, but this is a guy with a really big upside. Kendall has transformed his body. We've seen that out there. Looks like he's dropped weight. He's leaner. I think he's improved as a pass catcher. I want to see if he can still bring that leverage as a runner. I called him the Moose. I just love the way that Kendall moved piles. I love the way that he dropped the shoulder. I think he still has that power, but now even more. So it'll be really interesting to watch him. And Dejon Edwards, who Dell called the consummate student athlete, very unselfish team player. Obviously, Edwards, we've seen him in a lot of those mop-up roles in the fourth quarter. Everybody in the stadium knows he's getting it, and he's still moving the pile and making yardage. So be very interesting to see how much more Dejon Edwards can do this year. Obviously Robinson and Paul, the two incoming freshmen, and they're both talents. But here's the thing you have to understand. This is an offense where when Stetson Bennett goes to the line, there's 6 or 7 run checks. And for a freshman to process that quickly, and there's blitz pickup, and there's all these different protections, and you've got to know it inherently when Stetson makes that call, and then he might be snapping it, and it takes time to learn that. So I think we'll see Robinson and Paul in situations. I don't think either one of them is going to be a down in and down out player. I don't think either one of these guys is a Herschel Walker or a Jamal Lewis kind of guy that you go, oh my gosh, we got to put in the game. Because you look at them, and Kenny McIntosh and Kendall are just as bigger and stronger grown men versus 18-year-olds. Now, Robinson, I think Dell compared him to Takeo Spikes, former Auburn great, NFL great, no neck. He's a thick guy. But when you watch him, he's not as fluid as Paul. So it makes me wonder if Robinson's role might just be more of a short yardage guy. Now, he did catch the ball well from what I saw, but Andrew Paul has actually looked every bit as impressive as Robinson. Now, we'll find out more Saturday. They'll separate, because now the pads are on. Now the hitting's going to take place over there at Sanford Stadium on Saturday. So, Andrew Paul's a pretty big dude. So I know Robinson had all the recruiting stars and all that, but, right now, I don't think either one of them has the advantage over the other. I think it's going to have to do with who can pick up the offense the fastest and then make the most of those limited opportunities, because you've got some great players ahead of them in Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton that are much better versed and quite frankly much better players at this stage of their career. So pretty interesting. Dell says, those things are sorted out in practice. You earn those reps in practices. That's when that kind of gets predetermined of what the roles are going to be. Kenny, talking about Kenny, a guy that Georgia beat out for Oklahoma. Very late in the game. Kenny, came to Georgia very late in the game. Alabama had offered him. He'd been on a visit there late. Oklahoma was probably where he was going to go if Georgia didn't come in. And Dell said he catches the ball as well as any back since DeAndre Swift. Wow, is that a mouthful? To hear Kenny McIntosh compared to DeAndre Swift, it just says a lot, because Swift was a fantastic, really the last truly great back that Georgia's had was DeAndre Swift. So I think the last two guys were very good, but I wouldn't put them in the category of great. So very interesting to hear Dell say this guy has that sort of ceiling. So some interesting presentations today from Todd Monken and Dell McGee. Really enjoyed Kirby making those guys available. A little update, if you guys get a chance to go to dognation.com, I did something called Gimme 5. We've got this cool feature we do every Thursday where we're going to take 5 questions. Last week Connor did it, this week I did it. We take 5 questions and we answer one of the questions with a video. And the Jacksonville game just keeps coming up now. Jacksonville's really doing everything they can to rally the troops against Kirby Smart, and Kirby wants to win a championship, and Jacksonville's worried about their city more, and it's just created a divide because there's a few Georgia fans that want to party and don't want to give that up, even though the head coach is saying, look, we got to give this up because we want to be on a level playing field with Nick Saban and Alabama. That's what Kirby says, right? So the latest news that came out, and I'll kind of fill this in a little bonus coverage for you. Now they can give tickets. Well, they could always give tickets. They just had chosen not to because they can't talk to the kids. Even, you can leave a ticket for a kid at the Georgia-Florida game, but you can't talk to them. You're not allowed to have contact with them. You can't pay to fly them in. You can't take them out to dinner. You can't show them your facility 340 miles away. So it was a very minor, kind of a red herring yesterday. Like someone broke the story. It wasn't a break. It's always been the case where they could offer the kids tickets. It didn't make any sense because you don't get to talk to them. So you're not really hosting recruits. And it's been misreported by many outlets that don't understand recruiting and a lot of fans that don't understand it. We've all kind of been forced to become experts on these rules as a result of, oh my gosh, Kirby Smart is making a stand and wanting to change something that has held historical significance. But what else has held significance was not winning a national championship 41 years. That was historically significant. And Georgia doesn't want to go. Kirby does not plan on going another 41 years or 10 years or however long he's here and not winning another national title. And Georgia, the people that are paying him, Moorhead and Brooks, they're not making him the highest paid coach in the country because they plan on him going 41 years or Georgia going 41 years. So if you're going to win a title, Kirby says, you got to make decisions that help you win a title. And they're not always what you want to hear. It's not always easy. It's like going on a diet. You got to give up foods that you don't want to give up. And that's kind of what I think Kirby's kind of like trying to get across, the point he's trying to get across. But Jacksonville doing everything they can to keep that game, rally the troops, get everybody fired up. And it's going to be real interesting to watch it play out. Which way does Jerry Moorhead and Brooks side? Do they side with the head coach, or does the pull of money going to be too much? Also heard, once this goes to a 12-game playoff or 16-game playoff, SEC schedule expands to 9 games. That's probably when you see a perhaps multiple city rotation. Not just Athens and Jacksonville, but maybe Atlanta buys its way in. Now you got a 3-city rotation, right? So a lot happening there behind the scenes. Hard to document because it's not like there's public meetings where we can request transcripts. That's not what's happening, but there's a lot of operating going on right now. It's all predicated, though, on when does the SEC go to a 9-game schedule as far as the 3-city rotation. I think 2024 the game's going to be in Athens because I believe the Jacksonville Stadium is going to be undergoing a renovation for the Jags. So that's my thought. That's my feeling on that. Connor Riley's already got a live blog up right now. You can read some of the highlights of what Todd Monken and Dell McGee said in Connor's story on dognation.com. I'm Mike Griffith. You can follow me on Twitter at MikeGriffith32. We'll have more reporting from Georgia on Saturday from the scrimmage. Stetson Bennett Very strong fall camp so far. Looks really good, really comfortable back there. Looks like that position will be upgraded. I think you'll see more efficiency there, fewer mistakes. Offensive line is taking a step up. I think the backfield is just as strong, albeit not quite as deep. And I think the receivers and the tight ends will be even better. So we'll find out more about the defense as the camp goes. So everybody, have a wonderful Thursday, and I will be talking to you later this week.